Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, it's time to break down the week that was as the Mets finish up their West Coast trip. We also go in-depth on Max Scherzer's suspension, Ronny Mauricio's position change, a rotation review, and a new segment looking at Mets props in the week ahead. As always, we close out the show answering your questions, so subscribe to the Mets Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac Move-Up Sales Event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. And here's one more reminder to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, of course, if you want to watch the show, or wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And Joe, we'll jump right into the week that was. We are going to go a little bit more in-depth later on Max Scherzer's suspension, along with some other big Mets news like our rotation review. But top line here, since we last did a show, the Mets finished out their West Coast trip 3-3. Overall, a strong West Coast trip, though, for the Mets. So top line thoughts here, Joe, on this last week of Mets games.
West Coast trips tend to be a disaster for this organization historically. So getting out of the West Coast 7-3 on the 10-game stretch, to me is a huge win, especially with everything that they're battling in the rotation with injuries, suspensions, just so much going on, kind of a lot of chaos surrounding the Mets right now. But they're still pushing through, which is really the DNA of what the 2022 Mets were, which is they push through adversity, and Brandon Nimmo doesn't stop hitting. That's obviously been great to see. But if you think about the Giants series, I think it's just the fact that they lost the last two, I think has left a bit of a sour taste in some people's mouths. But if you just flip that and they lost the first two and won the second two, we have a different vibe going into this series with the Nationals. But I consider West Coast trip an overall success, 7-3, beat up on the A's, and then taking 2 out of 3 in LA against the Dodgers. I don't care if they're not at full strength or if they're not quite playing like the Dodgers normally play. Taking 2 out of 3 in LA is something that the Mets have struggled to do. So big credit to them.
100%. With the way the schedule has been changed, Joe, and you could argue it's always been this way, but now with everybody playing everybody, you got to beat up on the minnows of the ocean, right? You got to get your wins against those little fish. And the Mets did that. They swept the A's. But then they took 2 of 3 from the Dodgers. And any Mets fan that stayed up to watch those games can tell you the Dodgers look a little different right now. I don't care. So do the Mets right now. So does everybody. Everybody has significant injuries out of the gate. Get your wins, especially against the top dogs as well when you can. You take 2 or 3 from the Dodgers. It feels like the Mets never play well in San Francisco. They still split with the Giants, who are another team that's kind of going through their own problems throughout the roster. And look at all the Mets at the top of that lineup is really something to watch right now. So would you like to have beaten them 3 out of 4? Of course. But my top line takeaway here, Joe, is that other guys are picking up the holes in the organization right now. What I mean by that is the Mets lineup hitting from 1 to 9? No, but Pete Alonso is out of his mind right now and getting huge hits for this team. And Pete had a mammoth West Coast trip at times where he put the entire roster on his back. We're going to get into the rotation review, but once again, big picture here, guys did step up. Guys that we did not expect to have to pitch this early in the season. It is not even May yet, and the Mets have really tapped into their rotation depth as well. Some has gone well, some has really struggled as well. So when you look at the Mets right now, it's all about wins and losses. They found a way to have a big West Coast trip. Now you go home and you get the Nationals. When I said beating up on the minnows in this ocean right now, lake, whatever it may be, you got to get your wins. So you take care of business against the Nationals, and you head, hopefully, into the Braves series at home with a ton of momentum. But there is no way, Joe, to be this deep into the show and not discuss whatever the hell happened with Max Scherzer this past week. And I think we're all kind of sitting here, the Mets included, a little bit puzzled at this entire thing, especially when you're not on the field. You don't truly know what's going on. Max is a future Hall of Famer. He is somebody that has a pretty pristine background in terms of integrity with the game. The umpire, Phil Cuzzy, in this is somebody that has a history now of really being a stickler, should I say, in these situations. And I think when you look at this, it's frustrating for the Mets. It's frustrating for Scherzer because this is a situation that baseball has left the umps to enforce the nature of what's allowed and what's not with rosin and sweat. And I don't think fans of the game, I don't think teams and players in the game get any clarity when these kinds of situations go down. And now the Mets deal without their ace on a 10-game suspension and had to persevere through some pretty serious adversity after he was thrown out of that game, which they did.
There's a few things here. One, I don't know why this is subjective. Like it almost feels archaic and ridiculous that it's like literally I'm going to touch your finger and depending on if it feels sticky to me or not means you should get ejected. There has to be some kind of barometer developed of what is allowed, what is not allowed. And, look, Max's hands were sticky, but on Sunday Night Baseball, David Cohn did the demonstration of using the sweat, the rosin, and the alcohol, which is what Max said he used. And he was holding the baseball with two fingers like this, and it was just staying. So, yeah, his fingers got sticky. But to me, it looked like Max just followed every rule that they wanted. They said, get a new glove. He got a new glove. They said, wash your hands. He went with an MLB person, whoever that person is that like walked with him, watched him wash his hands and use everything. So if he was applying a sticky substance, which is ultimately the premise of the rule is to get rid of, spider tack and things like that are true sticky substances that are being used as a competitive advantage. Max was in front of an MLB person doing exactly what they told him to do. His fingers were sticky. So that's what warranted the ejection and the suspension. But at the same time, something needs to be figured out in this system. And, Max, unfortunately, gets the suspension out of it. But something needs to be figured out going forward for baseball. Because as we get into the summer months, people are going to start sweating. People are going to be using rosin and alcohol, whatever, to clean off rosin. Because with rosin, it's not like you just sprinkle a little water on it and the rosin comes off your finger. So you need to take that next step. So MLB needs, I think, to reevaluate where things are. But hey, the reality is the rule, as it said, Max warranted the ejection and the suspension. As unfair as it is for Mets fans, that's the way the rule is currently written.
There's a lot of things I can't unpack here, and Mets fans can't either. I think, number one, the thing people will point to is since these rules have been implemented, there have been 3 pitchers ejected for sticky substances. All 3 ejections were by Phil Cuzzy. That's not just coincidence. That means, like you said, Joe, Phil Cuzzy's barometer is different from every single other ump in the sport right now by a big, big stretch. Phil Cuzzy's quote is that the only one I've been able to see so far is, I said this to Buck and to Max. It really didn't matter to us what it is. All we know is that it was far stickier than anything that we felt, certainly today and anything this year. It's the middle of April. He's speaking like it's August, that he's dealt with 100 starters this year, hundreds and hundreds of different pitchers. And the second thing is, it didn't matter to you what it is. It has to matter to you what it is because sweat and rosin are legal in the game of baseball. When you have a job to enforce the rules of something, you need to go by the rules, not your own ideas that I don't care what it is. You have to care what it is. So this is an ump show. It is a problem in the sport, whether it's guys that are not qualified to properly call balls and strikes, whether it's not guys to properly enforce the rules. And there is now a track record of Phil Cuzzy not being qualified to enforce the rules in this new era of baseball, banning substances, but also having a significant line of what is an illegal substance and what isn't. And that's why you saw the emotion from Max Scherzer and the frustration from the Mets in this situation. So I think we'll put a bow on it there. But these are the lines that are very blurry in baseball. And if they don't get a handle on it, this happened in April. It wasn't really as big of a story as you'd expect. This happened in a playoff game. If this happened in a pennant run, this happened in a postseason race, a division race in August and September, this would be one of the biggest stories, the biggest story across the sport, but one of the bigger stories across all sports right now in terms of officiating in any sport. So frustrating for the Mets, and foolish by Major League Baseball, a league that in recent years, and I think I watch and cover enough sports to know this, just can't stay out of their own way when it comes to rules. So on a happier note, Joe, down on the farm time, smooth transition, something we begged for last episode, Ronny Mauricio. If Ronny Mauricio is a part of the Mets' long-term future, and with the way the man is scorching the baseball right now, we are hoping that's the case, it's not going to be at his long-time position as shortstop. Ronny Mauricio has now officially started making starts at second base, Joe. Do you like this move? What are your thoughts on this move, the timing of it, what it tells you? And if you're a little disappointed that it wasn't a switch to the outfield for Mauricio right now.
I'm not disappointed. I know Buck Showalter had said that the organizational plan is to get him reps kind of everywhere, second, third, first, outfield. So I think they're going to kind of play with his positional versatility now and utilize his athleticism to figure out what the best long-term fit is. I know one of the questions in the mailbag last week was about Mauricio at second and moving McNeil to the outfield. Well, if Mauricio's comfortable at second base and shows he's capable of playing at a major league level, that can become a part of the equation. Or maybe this week he's going to play some games in left field and they'll say, man, he looks good in left field. But I think it's an overall good sign when you think of his long-term home, because we had a million questions about Mauricio in the mailbag over the last few weeks. And, I read the comments on SNY's YouTube and people writing back on Twitter and everywhere that you guys comment and interact with the show. And the consensus from fans and people is the Mets just probably want to trade Ronny Mauricio. Like, if they're not willing to try him at another position, they don't have a long-term vision for him here. And I had said it on the show last week, maybe Ronny Mauricio does get traded at some point. Maybe it's at the deadline. Maybe it's in the offseason, whatever. But while he's here, you might as well try to develop him as if he's going to stay here. And this is just the first step in that direction. I think it's probably easier for him for his first foray away from shortstop. He's kind of moving like 20 feet to his left on just the other side of the base, a little easier than moving out into the grass or somewhere different. So good signs all around. Mauricio's hitting, like you mentioned, Connor. And now that positional versatility is finally getting flexed, and we'll see kind of how this all shakes out for his long term with the Mets.
That's the key, right? Is the bat. That's all we're really fixated on at this very moment, Joe. And, his first start at second base, he goes 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts. And then the 2 starts after that, he's a combined 4 for 10. So Mauricio settling in right away. He's allowed to have one bad game and then goes back to tearing the cover off the ball. And you just look at his season right now. I mean, we didn't have any expectations for Mauricio with the big league club in 2023. But Mauricio is trying to make this as difficult as possible for the Mets as he's hitting 350. His OPS is almost at 1,100. He has 6 home runs in 21 games. He's obviously driving the ball on as well. And, I think the thing we're most impressed with, Joe, is the on-base percentage almost being at 400 for a guy that typically doesn't draw a lot of walks, but also strikes out a lot. So just the fact that Mauricio looks like a different hitter is the key through all of this. So, as always, kind of bounce around here and go back to the big league club. And we didn't want to get too into this during the West Coast trip recap. We want to go in depth on our rotation review, our regular rapid fire look at the state of the starters. And it feels like, Joe, unfortunately, every single time we do this, there's a new name in here that we have to talk about. We'd like it to be the same 5. We'd like it to line up Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Kodai Senga, once upon a time, Jose Quintana, of course, as well. And then whoever holds down that 5th spot. Let's start with Senga before we get to our new name in Lucchesi right now. It feels like there's a little bit of a pattern here, Joe, where Senga comes out of the gate cruising. I don't know if it's a guy's getting a read on him the second or third time through the order, if he's getting tired, or it's just some guys can't be perfect through 5 or 6 innings. It feels like right now, Joe, finishing the game is the biggest thing Senga's trying to figure out. And I think that's pretty fair to expect for a guy with this big of a transition this early in the season.
Senga even said it himself. He was like, I didn't expect to come over here and just dominate out of the gates. And I think what you're saying, Connor, about the second time through, the third time through, I think that's a telling point. And that's ultimately the biggest test. And you've seen the Mets historically Joey Lucchesi, who we'll get to here, is an example that they previously purposely refused to let him go a third time through the order because people statistically have performed there. But I think Senga's stuff still looks really good. Like you said, out the gates, early in games, he looks dominant. It seems he is throwing he's seemingly throwing too many pitches in innings. Like he's struggling to put away hitters the second, third time through. So you're seeing 7 pitch at bats, 8 pitch at bats. And the only thing I will say to defend, or one thing I'll say to defend him, Senga just deals with the weirdest situations. San Francisco wasn't so much, but the Oakland start, that was the 17-run game. So he's having these long in-betweens. He's kind of had an odd transition, but overall it's an incomplete story. And I think you definitely want to see him extend. You need him to be a 5-inning pitcher at least, right? He needs to be 5-6 innings. He can't be going 4 innings and having to be pulled out, because the reality is, while the bullpen's performing well, that's not going to sustain if starters are going 4 and 5 innings every time out. You just can't do that to your bullpen. So Senga needs to find more consistency the second time through and find a way to put hitters away, even if that's not by the strikeout. Just get them to put the ball in play with weak contact.
So this is a funny transition here. Joey Lucchesi makes his debut. We haven't seen Joey Lucchesi in a long time, and boy, could not be happier for that kind of return. Lucchesi fascinates me, Joe, because I feel like this is the most buried trade in recent baseball history, and this isn't to bring a bad part of this. I'm just fascinated. Lucchesi is the forgotten man in a trade that a 3-team trade. I mean, Joe Musgrove goes to the Padres in this trade. We know how much of a problem Musgrove was for the Mets last year. Andy Rodriguez, who is off to a slow start this year, but traded from the Mets, not really thought of this highly at the time. He's a top 100 prospect in baseball now for the Pirates. And the Mets get Joey Lucchesi. Like, Joey Lucchesi cannot just be some kind of afterthought in that deal, which makes it that much better how great Lucchesi looked in his return to baseball for the Mets, with 7 innings, a 4-hit ball, scoreless baseball, the strikeouts, 9 strikeouts over 7 innings, Joe. I'm not going to sit here and do this whole, like, Lucchesi's the savior of the beginning of the Mets season, but if Lucchesi is 70 to 80% of what we saw from him, this completely changes the dynamic of the Mets rotation as they are waiting to get healthy.
The Giants couldn't pick up a pitch out of his hand. That's
Nothing.
The one thing I noticed. They weren't picking up the curve. They weren't picking up his 90 to 92 mile an hour fastball. They couldn't get a read on anything he was doing. And that deceptive delivery is something that is advantageous to him. There's a lot of arms and legs, and the ball's behind his back. So getting a read on the ball coming out of his hand can be difficult, which is why I think occasionally you'll see starts like this where he's able to get deep into games and kind of befuddle hitters. But he also has a history of not controlling his stuff within the zone. And that's kind of where when things fall apart for him, when he does that. So the way I look at Joey Lucchesi right now, and this will probably lead into our David Peterson conversation.
We're getting there, buddy.
Yeah, well, that'll lead into that. But Justin Verlander's on the brink of returning. If all goes well, I believe it's Friday is his rehab start. If all goes well Friday in his rehab start, he should be returning in the Detroit series next week. Max Scherzer has his 10-game suspension. Obviously, that's going to be coming up at some point here in the next week or so. And once those two are back, you got to make 2 spots in the rotation. So can Joey Lucchesi establish himself in this Washington series where I believe he's slated to start Thursday's game? Can he establish himself as, you want to send David Peterson and Tyler McGill down when Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander return to the rotation, and Lucchesi takes the spot? And if you have to option guys back and forth, you can. But like you said, Connor, off the Tommy John, first time back on a big league diamond, Joey Lucchesi was beyond impressive.
He really was. And Lucchesi, I think, once again, became a bit of an afterthought. This is somebody that did start 8 games for the Mets in 2021, and at times was highly effective. And he can be an ascending player, right? You don't want to forget that. I mean, Joe, when he was 25 and 26 years old, a 2-year season stretch for the Padres, his first 2 seasons in baseball, a former 4th-round pick, he made almost 60 starts, 56 starts in 2 years, and pitched pretty close to a 4 ERA. If the Mets can get that guy, hover around a 4 ERA, that's a big upgrade in the fifth starter spot. Then let's transition to, unfortunately, a guy that you and I had breakout expectations for this year in David Peterson that started off slow, and it's gotten way worse. There's no way around it. I mean, one okay start against the Marlins, a bumpy road, but still got through a start against the Padres, but a bad start against Milwaukee in the middle of that. And now back-to-back starts against the Dodgers and the Giants, where combined, Joe, he's given up 5 home runs. And when you watch the games Peterson's pitching, the contact is loud. It's hard. Even the outs, you're kind of sweating all the time. The control, here's the problem too, Joe, and I kind of want your piggyback thoughts off this. What I see with Peterson is, and this was the thing last year, the control's an issue and gets guys on base, but he found a way out of it last year. This year, he's getting guys on base and giving up home runs. And that's the death nail for pitchers very often.
You have two things. When you talk about a pitcher, you have control and command. Those are two different things. And I think people interchange them sometimes. Command is throwing strikes. Control is when you're throwing strikes, where is it in the strike zone? And yeah, and David Peterson is struggling with both command and control this year. And the obvious numbers, you could go on Baseball Reference and see, as of this recording, his ERA is over 7. He is still missing bats. That's the one positive. He's still getting his strikeouts, which people are still going to wave at that slider, and his changeup is improved. The velocity's there. Like, everything looks fine. But the reality is he's not locating anything. And not only are the on-the-surface stats bad, the under-the-surface stats are bad. Expected batting average, barrel rate, all that stuff is low. If you go on Baseball Savant, it's blue. And blue is bad, red is good on Baseball Savant. And there's a lot of blue on expected stats. So you do, on occasion, you'll see guys that their baseline numbers don't look great. And then you look underneath the hood and things are a little better. But with David Peterson right now, on the surface is bad. And then you pull up the hood and it doesn't seem like there's an engine in under the hood. So I think things are not going well for David Peterson right now. And I think it's fair to say his start against Atlanta this coming weekend is him pitching for his spot in the Mets rotation, at least in the near term.
The good about that is if he bounces back, that can really springboard momentum to the rest of your season, getting on track. The bad thing is you just expect him to get lit up against a good lineup. There's no way around it for me. So huge spot for David Peterson, and we will close this out with some quick thoughts on Megill. Megill is not as alarming to me. I'm not of the thought that Megill's ever going to be a frontline starter, and I kind of see Megill this year as a guy that I'd like to see him be able to work deeper into games. I don't care that he had a bad start against the Giants. He gave up 4 runs in 4 innings. So be it. When you look at before that, he's somebody that's been hovering around being a 5 innings of 2-run ball kind of guy. And if that's what the Mets are going to get out of Megill, a guy that wasn't expected to be in the rotation, that's fine. And probably what he is, Joe. And 4th and 5th starters have starts where they only go 4 innings and give up 4 runs. It happens. Your bat's got to pick you up and get you back in the game. So, and the Mets, to their credit, have done that for Megill most of the year. He's 3-1 with an ERA of about 4. It's 3.96. It's like the Mets have picked up Megill, and I think there's a mentality of baseball players when certain guys are on the mound that they know they have to do a little bit more. So I'm fine with Megill. I kind of have the red alert on Peterson right now, just like we had it on Carrasco before he went on the IL.
Yeah, I'm much less concerned about Megill. To your point, Connor, I think he's a back-end starter. That's what he is. I don't think you'll get 1 or 2 starts here and there where he'll go 6 or 7. He'll give up 1 run. He'll strike out 7. And we'll come on this show and do the week that was and be like, wow, look how Tyler Megill pitched. But then the next week, he'll give you 4 runs, a 4-run ball, 4 innings of 4-run ball, and throw 85 pitches in those 4 innings. So it's going to be up and down. The control and command at times does come and go for him, but he's going to be a back-end guy. And, maybe he is also competing for a spot in this rotation when you think about, obviously I said the impending returns of Max and Justin Verlander and potentially Joey Lucchesi stacking on that outing, having the opportunity to face the Nationals, where now he could string 2 starts together against, not so great competition. So yeah, Megill, He could go down, he could stay up, but I think he's pitching like a back end guy, which is really what you should expect.
And you know what? It's funny to me when we talk about the guys' starts that went well against the Marlins. It's so early in the season. I find myself not really looking at the standings very often, Joe. A lot less than I will in August. The Marlins are 12-11 right now. It's the Nationals that are 7-14. That, let's be real, you got to take care of business. If you could do it against the Marlins, who look much better than the Nats, then this is a good week for some guys to maybe springboard. And the NL East right now is fascinating. As we sit here and record, the Mets are 1 game back of Atlanta. It is tight in the middle besides the Nats. All right, a reminder, you're listening to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your shows. We're going to take a quick 15-second break and be right back on the other side with something new.
This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac Move Up sales event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Cadillac showroom today.
We are back, and it's time to let the games begin. We're starting a regular or semi-regular segment today. We'll see how it goes, where Joe and I will do some weekly predictions or prop bets, a little bit of both in here to keep things interesting throughout the season. The hook, Joe, is that we're going to keep score throughout this entire thing. And I'm not told what it was, but I'm told there will be a special prize. We're not even sure if this prize has been figured out by our incredible people behind the scenes at SNY, of course, including our producer, Jeff, who is the mastermind behind this. So a special prize at stake at the end of the season. Also, most importantly here, we need a good name for this segment. We got our rotation review. We got the mailbag. We got all the fun stuff. But to keep this thing going, we need a special name for the segment. We're going to outsource that and get you involved, the listeners. So please tweet at us. Of course, Joe at PSL to Flushing. I am at Connor J. Rogers. You can tweet at SNY. You should be following SNY so you watch all of our clips for the new segment name. Here we go. Joe, putting you on the spot first because that is what I do, the cowardly way. How many home runs will Pete Alonso hit the next 7 games? The Mets have 3 against the Nationals and, of course, 4 at home against the Braves.
I am going to go with 2. I think he's going to get 1 per series. And, yeah, I mean, he could hit 8 for all I know.
It looks like it these days.
At the rate he's going. But I'm going to say maybe the power cools down a little bit over the 7-game stretch. And I'm going to say he only hits 2 home runs in this stretch.
All right, so I'm going to make a promise during this segment that I never copycat an answer from you. So I will take 3. I'm in the line of thinking like 2 is good. 1 each series is fine. But with the way Pete's hitting, you just think, is he going to cool off and come back to at least normal mode at some point? 3 would be great. Let's roll with 3. I'll answer this one first this time. We'll keep it going back and forth. Over, under, / push. And the number is set at 6 for how many innings Joey Lucchesi goes in his next start. Like you said, Joe, it's against the Nationals, which gives you some hope. I am going to go under. I think he goes between 5 and 6 innings for Lucchesi.
I was going to go under as well, but for the sake of trying to win a game, we're trying to win a game here.
Exactly.
This isn't I don't want you to get a point and me get a point. I want it just me. I'm going to go push. I think he's going to go exactly 6 innings and he'll give up 3 runs, maybe 4. And, I think he's shown the ability to pitch deep into games, throwing that over 90 pitches in the outing against San Francisco. So I think the pitch count is there for him, which is a great sign. And weak competition, I think, gives him the opportunity to throw 6 innings.
How much are you going to be yelling when he's at 5 2/3 and you see John Curtis in the bullpen? And you just go, no, let him go. All right.
That's a double dip for you. John Curtis is your guy, too, though they optioned him to AAA. I don't even know if he got called back up. So I think he's still with Syracuse.
Felt like a little little roster maneuver for John Curtis.
For sure.
The next one, you get to start this one off, Joe. Over, under, push. The number is set at 4. For how many games Francisco Alvarez will start in the next 7? This is one where I feel like I have to copycat you if you go with my answer, but go ahead.
Until it's proven otherwise, I'm gonna say under. I'm gonna say Nito will play 4 and Alvarez will play 3. I think Alvarez should be playing at least 4, but it doesn't seem like that's in the cards. Which that could be a bigger conversation about Alvarez if we want to talk for a quick minute about him. I don't even know if we have him further down in the rundown, but
Believe we have him in the mailbag. We
okay,
do.
perfect.
We have him in the mailbag, so we'll do the deep dive on Alvarez in the mailbag.
Perfect. Well, I go under, and I'll say 3.
All right, I'll take the push then, which would be a miracle if Alvarez gets 4 of the 7 games. But you know what? I'm a believer at some point the training wheels got to come off, and maybe that home run, which was wildly impressive in San Francisco, sparks a little hope. But we will go deeper on Alvarez in just a moment. All right, I get this one first. Yes or no? Will Ronny Mauricio play another position besides second base or shortstop before the next show? I'm going to go no, Joe. I think they want Mauricio to get comfortable at second. Maybe if he cools off and there's not this path for him at the major league level this year, they throw him out in a corner spot. They do give him some different looks, but with only a week ahead, let the kid settle in at second base or play him at short if you need him to. What do you think?
That's
you could copy me here.
No, that's what I was going to say. I think that he will play second base for the next week. So I'm actually going to side with you on one. I'll accept that we both get a point on this one. And if not, and he's in the lineup on Thursday night or Friday night in left field, then that's just a feather in my hat because I've been hitting the left field drum for quite some time on Mauricio. But I'm with you, Connor. I think for the next week, let's let him get a little bit of an extended look at second base. And if this question were in next week's episode, I would say that he would play another position by then. Maybe you do it in like couple week increments, like couple weeks at second, couple weeks in left, couple weeks at third, and then from there revisit what's next for Ronny Mauricio.
Final one for the segment to be named later. Thanks to you, the listeners. Joe, you get to kick us off here. How many wins for the Mets in the next 7 games?
I am going to go 4-3. So 4 wins.
4 wins. Okay, I'll take 5 then. I would have went 4 as well. I'll go with the 5. So the Mets take care of business against the Nationals. It does feel like it's the Nationals. They'll steal one because they're just such a pain to us. Even when they have AAA players come up. Remember at the end of last year, like, why are the Nationals winning any of these games? But I'll say the Mets take care of business against the Nats, split against the Braves. I'm curious how Atlanta's ultimately going to line up in that series because they've been dealing with some problems of their own. I know Spencer Strider's coming off an incredible start, but they've had rotation issues as well. Max Fried is back, though. As always, let's close out the show answering your mailbag questions. And, Joe, I will start with the Alvarez one because we wanted to get into his play or lack of play over the last week. This is from Dan B. Dan asked, given how well he's playing defensively, what's the level of concern for Alvarez's bat on a 1 to 10 scale? He didn't exactly light it up in AAA either.
All right, so the defense is where I wanted to start. The pitch framing, the way Alvarez looks behind the plate, how comfortable he is receiving has been one of the biggest surprises of the season for me. This is a guy that in the offseason, we were answering questions, can this guy be a catcher at all? And he looks perfectly comfortable back there. Doesn't mean he's perfect. He's got to get the ball out a little quicker on his throws because he does have a strong arm. The pop time needs to come down a little bit. And he does struggle a little bit here and there with some balls in the dirt. But he also has some good blocks too. So I've been pleasantly surprised. As of this recording here on Tuesday, he's in the 78th percentile amongst catchers in pitch framing. So to me, that's a huge win. And if you ask anyone in the Mets, outside the Mets, around the game, you can't find anyone that doesn't think Francisco Alvarez is going to hit. So he needs some consistent playing time and some patience. He's a 21-year-old kid playing catcher. The amount of people that have come to the big leagues as a 21-year-old catcher, you could count on less than one hand. Like, it just doesn't happen. So it's a bit of an anomaly. And if he could get consistent playing time, you're starting to see him hit the ball harder. His exit velocity is increasing. That's up into the upper 70s amongst percentile in baseball right now. And the home run that he hit in San Francisco, I know I had a tweet and it made me laugh, and I had to quote tweet it just for fun of someone complaining about the home run that he swung at a ball, and that shows the problems with his plate discipline. And I'm just like, never change Mets Twitter because a home run still is going to get criticized. But look, at the end of the day, plate discipline does need some work. But if you can hit a pitch that was the third highest pitch off the ground, hit for a home run this year, that shows your raw power. Yeah, it was 74 miles an hour or whatever, but that slider going up by Tyler Rogers is a very difficult pitch to hit. So to me, that was a huge win for Alvarez, and hopefully that's a confidence booster going forward for him, that he had to get the monkey off his back. He was struggling very much at the plate, and his numbers still obviously aren't good. And, we have time for that to work itself out. But like you said before about a confidence boost, like if Peterson had a good start in Atlanta, that could be a confidence boost that takes him forward. I think the same thing for that home run for Alvarez could be a confidence boost for when he is in the lineup. Maybe he's going to feel a little more comfortable at the plate.
I'm with you, Joe. I texted you right away when he hit that home run. I said, out of all the pitches to hit a home like that, he can do the near impossible. The easy is going to come to this guy. He is 21. He will not turn 22 during this major league season. If you brought up, Joe, this just doesn't happen for catchers. Adley Rutschman, who's one of my favorite young players in the game, he came up as a 24-year-old. 24, 3 years older than Alvarez when he made his major league debut for the Orioles. And he was solid. He wasn't amazing. He was good. He wasn't amazing. So I think perspective is key. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. And one more thing, too. The barometer for an offensive catcher is also pretty low. So I believe
going to go there.
Yeah, I believe the average OPS for a catcher in 2022 was around 660, which is not a good OPS. So Alvarez has an opportunity to be a huge weapon for the Mets, an advantage at a position that is not deep throughout the sport. Just got to give it some time. And I understand it's actually a very funny dichotomy if you think about it. All we field is questions about call up this prospect, call up this prospect. Prospect comes, and it's not an immediate boom, then he's not ready. Send him back. So some patience is required with Alvarez, but like you said, my concern level, just to actually answer the question on a 1 to 10, a 1.2, like barely above 1. Like I have almost no concern. Alvarez is going to hit, and you're just going to deal with the ups and downs of a rookie season for a 21-year-old catcher.
Here's the thing for me, Joe. He's framing better than Nito right now by a pretty significant margin. You could say Alvarez isn't hitting, right? In 27 at-bats, he's got 4 hits and the home run, 2 RBIs. The OPS is 407. Here's the problem, Joe. Tomas Nito, in 41 at-bats, has 5 hits. 1 more hit. No extra base hits. A 281 OPS. 281. Like you said, you want to talk about a low bar, and we like Nito. Nito's a good backup catcher. And this goes to show you how much the Narvaez injuries really hurt, because Narvaez looked impressive at the plate in a very short stint. But this goes back to just yelling into the void of why just play Alvarez. I'm not saying play him 6 out of 7 games. Play him 4 out of 7. Play Alvarez, because he can do something that Tomas Nito can't. And that is put the ball over the fence in any given at-bat. And it's not like Nito brings any stability to the plate where you can go, well, Nito's going to work counts and get more hits. He's not. He's not. And he's not better defensively right now. So it's very frustrating. But we'll see if anything changes, and we'll give the Mets that benefit of the doubt from now. The next one from Zach Petersell. He said, how concerned are you guys about the bullpen usage to start the year? Do you see any guys in AA or AAA that can come up and provide solid innings? Is Jeff Brigham the next Edwin Diaz? Joking, but he's been great.
Jeff Brigham's electric.
I like his energy.
I had no idea. Man, coming off the mound, he just saved Game 7 of the World Series or something when it was a tie game in the 6th inning in San Francisco in April. But he looks good. The sweeper, which apparently everything that's a slider is now a sweeper.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a new thing. But whatever. His sweeper looks great. The fastball is up to 95, 96. So Brigham's actually been pretty impressive. Overall, the bullpen, the Mets could not have asked for more from this bullpen, given the fact that they lost Diaz. And we've talked about this over the last month and a half of everyone goes up a peg. Well, now you're getting things from Edwin Uceda. You're getting things from Denny Reyes. Obviously Jeff Brigham now. So the bullpen's been fantastic. The concern, I mentioned it very briefly earlier in the show, is the starters need to start providing some more length in this game, in these games, because the bullpen can't be going 4 to 5 innings every night. That's just not sustainable. So hopefully when Verlander comes back, Max comes back, the Mets can work themselves more into a position where the back end guys could go short, but the top of the rotation guys will give them some length.
Brigham has faced 12 batters, Joe. He struck out 7 of them. He's not allowed a hit. He's pitched 4 innings this year of no hit, no walks, 12 batters, 7 strikeouts. Maybe it's a hot start. Maybe it's the beginning of something beautiful. Who the hell knows?
And hey, look, when it comes to bullpen arms, you take these weeks at a time. Like if you could get 3 weeks and then maybe he gets beat up a little bit and you option back to AAA and bring someone else up, like that's how the bottom of bullpens work in baseball. You try to just ride mini streaks, and then when things maybe fall apart, and maybe they won't fall apart for Jeff Brigham, but if they do, you just option them back and you bring someone else up and try to get another couple weeks out of someone.
So it wouldn't be an episode of the Mets pod without some lineup talk, because that's a tradition in Mets fan base like no other. So we'll close out today's mailbag with this one from Steven Shine. Steven asked, given McNeil is more of a table setter and Lindor has way more pop, why not bat McNeil third and Lindor fifth? Too often McNeil gets a single and dies on the vine because the bottom half is ... suboptimal. Joe, I've thought about this lately as well with the Mets lineup, the construction of the Mets lineup right now. Lindor, it truly feels like Lindor, and I know he hit 270 last year and he did have a 339 on base, which is very good in the shift era. But with Lindor this year, it's been the opposite. He's only hitting 221, but he's got a higher OPS, 798 OPS. Lindor already has 9 doubles and 4 home runs. Like when Lindor connects, it's big hits. And I agree, McNeil, for the better, honestly, of his long-term future, because we saw what happens when he gets fixated on power. And McNeil, after what seemed like a slow start, is batting 296 with a 418 on base percentage. It's just insane. I'm kind of thinking about this, where I'm like, you know what? We've talked about 6 through 9 with this lineup too much where my head is just going to explode. That's an obvious agree. McNeil gets on base. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is something that I would experiment with, but I don't have the confidence they will. What do you think, Joe?
I wouldn't mind playing around with it, but I want Francisco Lindor to get as many at-bats as possible.
That's a really good point. Yeah. That's a problem.
So like you said, the slugging percentage is up. He may not be hitting for the same average and he's striking out, but I don't want to lessen his quantity of at-bats, though I certainly understand the other side, and I'm not opposed to trying it, because if Nimmo keeps getting on base the way he is, Marte keep playing the way he is, and then you add McNeil, you're now setting up Alonso and Lindor to drive in multiple runs when they are hitting their home runs and their extra base hits. So I certainly get it, but I think, too, the bottom of the order, I think it's going to start taking some shape here, because I think Brett Beatty is now here. And, to their credit, they're playing Brett Beatty most of the time since he's been up. Maybe Alvarez gets some of that confidence. And, Mark Hanna's going to be Mark Hanna, like some good, some bad. He had a little stretch and now he's kind of back to being what it was. So the bottom of the order is going to have his ups and downs.
Vogel's been fine.
Vogel's been fine.
Hasn't got to play a lot because they face a lot of lefties.
Tommy Pham's been fine playing in the spurts that he has. So overall, I think the lineup is doing fine. Last I checked, I didn't check today, so this could be out of date. But last I checked, they were up to 7th in baseball in runs scored. So for all the hubbub and how the lineup has performed, they're still scoring more than a lot of teams in baseball, all things considered. So I'm a little less concerned than maybe I was, because I have some confidence in the young players at the bottom. But when it comes to McNeil and Lindor flip-flopping, I could take it or leave it, to be honest. I wouldn't mind trying it, but I think Lindor is also very comfortable in the 3-hole, and I wouldn't want to make him too uncomfortable if I could.
The Mets are in a weird spot. They really are. It feels like they need one more legitimate power bat.
They need a 5-hitter. They need a real five hitter.
A real five.
Yeah.
I think that is the issue. And I don't know if that solution is in sight anytime soon. I say no. I mean, barring Alvarez getting on a heater, and they're never going to give him that chance. But honestly, the answer, Joe, is for Brett Baty to be the Brett Baty that we expect. Maybe not now, but at some point this year.
Yeah.
Because Baty's a guy that could hit 24 home runs, I think, in a year. And that could be a 5-hitter for the Mets. So, because the problem with Vogelback is fine, but nobody really thinks that, because what Vogelback does is he gets on base. Right. And Vogelback, where he bats, that doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter right now. And I hate making somebody, the fall guy or the pylon guy all the time, but my real problem with this lineup right now has not been anyone in 1 through 5. Alvarez struggling, Vogelback only getting on base, McNeil getting on base, but nobody being able to drive him in. It's Mark Canha. And I know it's harsh, but when you look at it right now, Canha's batting .240. He's just not really, it's blows my mind that in 22 games, he does have 2 home runs and 6 doubles, because it just feels like Canha has not had it in the big spots. And you give him that chance to turn it around. Of course, Escobar has been another part of that problem, but how many times can you? I mean, Escobar way more than Mark Canha. Escobar has been horrible this year, but at least they've moved off of Escobar as much as they were playing him at the beginning of the year. There are things where you go, okay, this could be easily correctable, but what is the answer? And I like the McNeil Lindor swap, but I don't think that's the gimme there, because you break up at the point that Lindor has to bat more than the fifth spot.
Yeah, so. I don't exactly know what the ripple effect would be there. And, Mark Canha's just not getting on base at the clip that he had previously. That's the thing. He's been known as a notorious on base guy. So if he were getting on base, that would be, a slightly different conversation. And yeah, we can do lineup talk forever. I'm sure we'll get another one in next week's mailbag, and we'll be talking the lineup probably every week for the next few months. But, you have the catcher in the 9th spot, you bet. Mark Canha down there, and you have to kind of mix and match a bit to get through the stretch. And I do think when you get closer to the deadline, you have to seriously consider making an upgrade that maybe you weren't expecting to have to.
Absolutely. All right. So it is amazing how we'll have like 2 minutes left in the show, and lineup could give us 6 to 7 minutes left in the show. It's very, very easy for us. But with that being said, a massive week ahead for the Mets. We're really excited to be back next week to kind of recap it all as we do, because the Nationals is one of those, very much like the A's, take care of business, get your wins, and then play up in the Braves series, because standings don't matter a lot right now, but letting it be known like, hey, you stole the division from us at the end of last year. We could still beat you guys. So it'll be a big week for the Mets against Atlanta, especially at home. And this is the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac move-up sales event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. And remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.